All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. That was a really exciting. I see we're going to have some, people still chiming in, coming in from the keynote address. My name is Gil. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gil Pisano. I'm on the board of Agile Richmond, and Julie Bright, who is also here from Agile Richmond, is going to be helping us all this channel. And I'm so excited to be with Channel 2. This channel will stay open all day, and we'll just go from session to session. And um, I'm very honored here to introduce our first speaker on this channel, Wes Royer. He's a director of product at Clarivate, product management executive, CSPO, digital marketing strategist, event speaker, believer in outcomes over output, change agent towards agile DevOps and product ops. Um, so he's going to be talking about being agile before and during transformations. So before I pass it right on over, Julie and I will be keeping time and take any questions in the chat if you like. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, but then we'll keep an eye on the time before the end of the hour. All right. With that said, welcome, Wes.
Hey, thanks for having me. All right, so before we get into this, if you can, I think it helps everyone kind of know who's attending and kind of the audience that we have in the comments. If you're willing to share with everyone where you're located, hoping we have people beyond just Richmond, just Virginia, but where you're located, what your current job role is, as well as maybe the company name you're at. Again, may help for some questions or redirecting of the topics later. But myself, Wes Royer, I work at Clarivate. Yes, Gil, you did pronounce it correctly. And I'm located in Goochland County, which is in between Richmond and Charlottesville, and fully work remote now. And I'll get to that later as part of this presentation as well. So really, let's kind of just ask, who am I, right? Because not everyone's going to know who I am. So to start off, I am not a consultant looking to sell my wares here. So I want you to sit back, relax, come up with questions you can. I'm really here to kind of tell you and share a story that hopefully a lot of you can relate to around what my agile, but also just product management journey has been over the past couple of decades. Kind of weird to say decades at this point. And just in my current role, how we've gone from pre-agile to actually implementing some Scrum to doing a full transformation globally, and kind of just how we did that, and kind of the impacts of it and where we currently are on that journey, hoping that, again, a lot of you can feel like you're in that same journey and that some of this may sound good to you, some of it may sound scary to you, but let's get past all that and see what we can all do together at our different organizations to make things like this happen. So just really quick background on me. Out of college, which George Mason University, was in communications and marketing at some nonprofits. Then somehow made it into a developer role in product management way back then. Eventually making it over to Northrop Grumman for some data analysis, and then CX Loyalty, and eventually GE for, again, kind of solutions analyst, business analyst, and product management there. Took a break with some digital marketing at Authentic, but then moved over to a company called Silverchair, not the band, but a company out of Charlottesville, where I was head of product for a couple of years. And then some people at Clarivate plucked me out of Silverchair and brought me over to Clarivate to work on some new projects there. So what I want to do is take that and overlay kind of an agile journey, if you will, across that. So in the beginning, I didn't even know what agile was, software development lifecycle, all that stuff was new. Everything was just get things done. There was no process to how we did things. But then the next couple of jobs, Again, when I started doing development and was a product manager, sometimes both at the same time, because that's your .com era. Did pretty much what would be extreme programming, I guess. By definition, looking back, it probably was it, but we didn't call it that at the time. Again, it was still just, I've got this thing, get it done as soon as possible, work with someone side by side at a desk and get it done. And that's how we operated. After that, though, went to some more formal corporations where waterfall was the way. It was heavily processed, documented. We tried exploring, if you will. We were asked, a couple of us were asked to go explore what is Agile, what is Scrum, what is Kanban, come back to the team with what we learned. But I can say it just kind of really never went anywhere at that point at those companies. But then when I got to GE, it was a complete switch. I went from completely waterfall previous two companies to now Scrum, pretty mature process of Scrum at GE. But even then, still just Scrum. Like it wasn't, they were just getting into kind of user design and some design thinking and things like that. Then when I went back into digital marketing and digital strategy, there things were done very much agile for our clients, or sorry, waterfall for the clients. I tried to introduce some agility to it, start doing some Scrum sprints and ceremonies, so Agile fall, but didn't really take off too much there. But thankfully, when I went over to Silverchair, they were actually in Scrum for several years. They had just started doing Scrum fundamentals to just kind of like re-baseline everything. And then they started incorporating some scaled agile concepts such as planning increments, program increments, which were actually pretty successful. Painful to learn the first time, but successful in getting it done. So then, and this is where kind of the rest of my story today is going to be about, talking to people at Clarivate. They're interested in, hey, same industry as Silverchair, which tends to be academic publishing and research for sciences and humanities and such. And they said, we'd love for you to come build some new products for us. We haven't really done a lot of new product development in a long time. They had a lot of flagship enterprise products that have been out there for a long time. So doing a lot of feature development as opposed to product development. And of course, my questions going into that were going to be similar to this, which is, if I was going to go to the perfect dream state as a product manager, an agile product manager, what are the things that I'd want, right? So I'd want, they're going to be in a Scrum model or something similar, and I want to be mature. I don't want to be haphazard, but we're doing a couple things there, whatever. Love to have program increment planning there because it really helps with priorities and such. So again, a mature model there. I want team autonomy, right? I want to be able to, as a product manager, be able to build the things that I want to build in the way that I'm learning from the user they need to be done. Deliver those outcomes to the users without too much bureaucracy. I'd have analytics and user feedback from the beginning of time. So as soon as the product was launched, it already had it in it. I could go back, it's all there, it's easy to find. I'd have dedicated UX staff. We'd be doing prototyping and user interviews every sprint. We'd have all of our business software, whether it's Office, Jira, Confluence, whatever you use, we'd have all of it, right? And you would not be required to use VPN to access it when you're out of the office. There'd be some centralized platform tools. So if you're a bigger company and you've got multiple products, right, have some centralized tools maybe around analytics or authentication, alerts, things like that. And you'd have that, and they'd be mature, but they'd also be flexible enough that when you build a new product, you can leverage them or they can adapt to what you need. All of our apps would be responsive. It's weird to say that now, but it feels like more than 10 years ago, the push was everything has to be responsive for mobile, for the iPhone, everything. There's still so many applications that are not. So of course, we want everything to be designed for responsive and to be executed responsively. Automated testing would just be the norm. Everything would be automated. And then the next step of that, CI/CD, we'd have all of it. We'd be mature in that as well. We'd be doing alpha and beta and gamma releases so that we can get feedback internally and then a little bit externally from some trusted people, and then make it a little bit broader before you go go to market. And then wouldn't it be great if marketing and sales and finance they knew what Agile was, and they actually participate, they actually operate in an Agile framework themselves, even have marketing as part of the squad, that type of thing. And then co-located squad, right? That dream of being able to sit in a room or a table with everyone's at arm's length. When there's questions, they get answered right away. When we need to solve something, we can quickly work on it and knock it out, and not have to wait for later, not have to use email all the time or always have to use chat. We could actually have face-to-face conversations just to get things done. So that's the dream state, right? That's a dream. If anyone that's attending this lives this, please reach out to me. I would there per se, but just I'd be fascinated to hear that. What the reality for a lot of product managers is going to be is they come in and Scrum is, we do some of the things. Yeah, we have sprints, we have stand-ups every morning. Although probably most everyone's sitting down. We have some ceremonies, but they're not really following the fundamentals of it. And it's not really a kind of natural process for them. Program increment planning, I mean, if you're not doing, fundamentals of Scrum and that's not mature there, I can't imagine you're doing program increment planning. So what is that is probably the question you get a lot of times. Team autonomy, probably what you're experiencing is maybe everything requires a sign off by someone in a management level, maybe even a finance level, before you can start working on new products, new features, expanding things, going into a new market, that type of thing. Analytics, you might get asked, well, what tools should we be using? I've gone to plenty of companies where products don't even have analytics plugged in yet. And we're talking even in the past several years where products are not really plugged into analytics, which is horrible. Don't know how you operate in that regard, but it happens. And then user feedback on top of that, whether you're using tools for that or you're somehow reaching out to your users and customers out in the wild, probably don't have much of that. UX staff, probably a lot of people are still dealing with, well, we have a design person in the company and they can help you, but they're not really dedicated to your squad or your team, maybe not even your business unit. So they're a shared resource. You got to get approval for their time, their priority, all that. Prototyping, you might get asked, well, great, tell us how you do that. Maybe you're not doing that yet. Maybe user interviews aren't happening. Business software, sure, everyone's using Office, but damn, I still have to use VPN to get to it. And then do I have things like Atlassian products or Mural or Envision, things like that, Airtable? Do I have any of that? You may have some, you may not have all the ones that you think you need. Centralized platform tools, again, that's really only going to apply to like a bigger company that has multiple products like I'm currently in. But sometimes when you go into those scenarios, it's, oh, well, you could probably just reuse some of the code that's on this other product and this legacy product. I'm talking about centralized platform tools, again, where it's a centralized analytics system or centralized authentication system across all the products, things like that. May not have that. Responsive design, it's been on the roadmap, hear that a lot. Automated testing, yeah, sure, we've automated a couple of the scenarios, but not really the majority of the testing. And then CI/CD, again, kind of like program increment planning, might have to explain what that is. The different types of releases, doing an internal release, doing a limited beta release to just a couple of trusted users before you do a full go-to-market. You may get questions of, well, do we really need that? You may have leadership that's saying, hey, I just want to get it out in the market. And it's like, okay, yeah, there's risk involved with that, but we can do that. And then other departments, other functions like marketing, sales, and finance, a lot of times, a lot of them don't know what Agile is. Um, or if they've heard that the product and technology teams are doing that, they don't know how to apply it, or maybe they're actually resistant to changing their status quo and how they do things. And then the bottom one, co-located squad. Um, the reality in today's world is, especially as our company gets bigger, is you're going to have distributed people across different time zones, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does create a little bit more of complexity in how you do your day-to-day ceremonies, meetings, calls, reach out for help, make sure that someone that's 6 to 10 hours ahead of you doesn't have any open questions that aren't going to get answered for 24 hours, that type of thing. And one of the things I left off of here, and Gil, you mentioned it when you introduced me, I totally forgot to put product ops on here, which is probably the newest of all these things listed on here. Probably in the past 2 years or so that's become a thing. Yeah, it would be great on the previous slide that yes, you have product ops, you have operations of products and how that standardization of how it's operating. But it's a fairly new thing. That's probably why I forgot to put it on here. And a lot of companies are just learning what it is and how they can actually implement it. So they probably don't have that. So with that in mind, I was asked to go to Clarivate and build new products. And it wasn't this bad, like you're seeing on the screen here. It really wasn't, but there's definitely elements of it. They were still doing waterfall in a lot of places. There were some pockets of teams that were doing Scrum on their own. It wasn't a company-wide thing. We certainly, because of that, didn't have any program increment planning across any of that, any scaled agile at all. Team autonomy was there for some teams, not there for others. And maybe even for some of the teams, they shouldn't have had autonomy. They had maybe a little too much autonomy to just go off and continue doing feature development without really talking to their users. And then again, analytics, not all the products had analytics plugged in yet. So it was kind of a new thing for some of the teams. And then getting that feedback on a regular basis, sometimes that feedback, especially in a B2B world, the feedback was coming from the paying customer. It wasn't coming from the end users. So that can be a struggle when you're trying to put things of value out there. And then UX staff was pretty limited back then. So that ties in the next one. There wasn't a lot of opportunity to be doing prototyping unless the product manager wanted to do it. And then to do user interviews, again, unless the product manager wanted to do it. There's definitely plenty of business software. A lot of it was coming off of requiring VPN, so that was great. We did have centralized platform tools, but they needed to grow a little bit more to be usable by all the products. A lot of the products definitely had responsive design on the roadmap. A lot of them have actually gotten there, so I'll get more into that later. And then automated testing was definitely happening in pockets. It wasn't happening kind of all over the place. CI/CD was not even a thought. Doing alpha, beta, gamma releases was a norm in some of the product lines, but not at all in the others. They would just big bang drop things out to the entire market, the entire user base. Boom, all of a sudden it's like Facebook changing the entire look and feel of their application, and people start complaining about it. There's no kind of like easing into it. And then certainly the technology team, the product teams are the only ones who are kind of thinking about agile and design thinking and things like that. And then we are a global company. Currently, we're 8,000, getting ready to acquire another company that was announced this past Monday, which could increase that a lot more. So definitely distributed across time zones, but for the most part, a lot of the single product teams were pretty much co-located in one or just two places, not that you'd have a team of 5 or 8 people that are in 5 different places, right? Not to mention what a pandemic does for that. So we'll get to some of that. So one of the first things that I had to come in and do was my boss said, hey, look, we've got this site that marketing built 10 years ago or so, has a little bit of technology behind it, has a little bit of analytics behind it, but it really just sits out there. It gets a lot of traffic. I mean, more so than even some of the products do. And we really want to treat it like a product. We want to turn it into a product, and see what we can do with that. And so there was a lot involved in where the company was at that point. So we were pre-agile transformation at that point. Again, there was a group of us and all different functions and teams and products and such that were new to the company. There's a lot of new hires at that point. And not through acquisitions, they were actually new hires that a lot of us experience design and user research, but we had to come into an environment where, oh, okay, so we're going to have to actually teach people what these things are, kind of be our own influencers within the company to get leadership to notice that these things need to happen, maybe get some buy-in from them to spend some money on making it an actual transformation, things like that. So at this point, it was really, like I said, we're a bunch of influencers. There wasn't a company-wide transformation happening yet. And so came in and there was, like I said, some limited analytics I could use. There was one user survey from over a year prior that I could go look at some survey results from actual users. It was actually pretty thorough and had a lot of respondents, but it was a year old and it was kind of a different thinking about what we were going to do with the site. I had to build a squad. So again, the company I came into had a lot of flagship enterprise / legacy products, products that have been out there for 10, 20 or more years, mostly sold into, you know, another business such as a university or a publisher. And so I had to go in and with a couple of managers kind of pluck people out of those enterprise, those flagship teams. And they were not used to building new products. They were not used to working in Scrum, certainly. They were used to working in much more of a waterfall, way of doing things. And so I had to, and I'm not an Agile coach. Let's just throw that on the table right now. I am a product manager. I'm not a Scrum master. I'm not an Agile coach, but I had to, teach them some basic Scrum. Let's try to do this. Let's see what we can do without doing any formal training, except for like, here's a couple of videos you can go watch, and see if we can make that work. Get them used to, and this was a challenge. Get them used to, yeah, and I want to do sprints with releases every 2 weeks, and that was just, whoa, wait, you want to do what? We agreed on 3. We got to 3, but get them used to that, and do this, by the way, without a Scrum Master, because we didn't have that really as a role within the company yet. So it was kind of on me, and then get some people interested in it, get a program project manager we had off the side to act as a Scrum Master, and that really did help because he was bought into it. And eventually, over time, the team does get bought into it. They start to see the flexibility of it, the flexibility with a certain structure to it. They start to feel like the weight's been lifted off them as far as dropping these gigantic code releases and huge efforts of QA that have to happen, and tons of coding just for automated testing has to get done. It gets a little bit easier because now we're breaking it down, right, into smaller chunks, smaller releases, smaller QA cycles. And so over time, and it took probably at least 2 months for a squad of, again, 5 to 8 people to really get used to developing in this method. But they started to buy into it. They started to realize, hey, you know what? I can pretty much do a 9 to 5 job now because I'm not stressing about all of the collateral and headache that happens when I'm doing a monolithic release. So that, again, for them, started to actually change their mindset on this a little bit. And I'm going to come back to that later. They had to learn how to set up new environments with this as well. So again, keep in mind, we're talking about people who have mostly been doing new feature development on existing products, on existing environments. Even though there was an AWS transformation or migration a year or two prior, but this is now setting up a new product with those new environments and such. And so they had to learn how to do that. And I had to learn what the difficulties, even though I'm in product, I'm not the developer, I had to learn what the difficulties were for them in doing that and find people in the organization that could help them out. Again, it's building their first new app in years. And then this is the first time for a lot of these people, I guess all of them really, to leverage centralized platform tools. And so specifically here it was for authentication, some analytics, and one or two other things I'm not thinking of. There was a new framework for the UI, like the front end, what it would look like. So they get used to how to work with those, what that means, how to be somewhat dependent on another team for that. Adding more complexity, they had to get data from many internal and external sources. The external sources were probably easier, right? Because those are either open data sources or there's documentation. I could go do all the fact finding for them, bring it to the developers, some requirements, and they could just get started on that. The internal one, now I've got to vie for someone's time to get a file in place, whether it's a one-time file or an actual integration. Maybe there's actually a file that's dropped on a server somewhere on a daily basis anyways that we could get. So I had to track people down who knew what it was, who could get us access, all those things. That added to the complexity of this as well. And then on top of all of that is learning what Clarivate's go-to-market process is. So that's really a commercialization and a marketing thing, but it's important here. I think it's one of the things that I've seen a lot where as a team, as a company does get more mature with their agile user, UX and design thinking processes and all that, a lot of times where they can end up still struggling is how you work with sales and marketing, account management, customer service, all of them to make sure that everything's in place for when you go to the market. Like what's the campaign plan? What's the communication plan? How are we going to talk about this? How are we going to support this? That type of thing. And so this was probably, except for maybe GE, which was GE Healthcare, this was probably the first place that really had a process. And that process has changed every year for the better. But having to learn that process and get our development and delivery process, even honestly, the design and discovery process to really fit in line with the overall go-to-market process, make sure that we were doing things that aligned with it. Again, because those go-to-market processes, working with those non-tech teams, it's really important to the success of the product. It's really important to the company's brand that we're not doing something off-brand. And so finding out how to integrate that go-to-market process earlier, all the way up in discovery, that was something that had to be learned, not just by my team, but a lot of teams as well. And so really the point here is, I didn't come into a dream state, but there were things that we could chip away at, again, before any type of official agile transformation, before any design ops or product ops or any of those newfangled things that we have now. There were ways I could chip away or bring in pieces of that that really started to change people's mindset. And we really had a small, awesome team, some of the best people I've ever worked with, that were able to launch a beta version of this application within just several months. I think we started in end of January, like last week of January. And then we had a beta rolled out, I believe it was in the first week of June. Again, with all the things above that we had to overcome. And then do a full release after that. So I think it was 3 months or so after that that we did a full release to the entire market. Outcomes of that, we doubled the traffic of this site, increased the net promoter score on it dramatically. But also by putting analytics on there more aggressively and more thoughtfully, and then also putting some user feedback tools like Hotjar and things like that on there, we were able to learn a lot more about our end users, not just for this product, but because this product is kind of what we call the free layer of some of our other products. It allowed us to learn a lot about those other guys be further down their workflow, their daily workflow, that those other products were not solving or maybe even hindering. And so we were able to upfront here in a kind of a more safe space, because again, it's not a paid product. We were able to collect that information and bring it to the other products, and then they could act on that in a way that they had not been able to in the past. And so that in itself was a major outcome or win for this. And it also then kind of set a tone. While I was doing this, there were, within several other business units, there were pockets of teams that were kind of doing things like this as well. And it did spark all the way at the top, the leadership top. It did spark some questions about, hey, how did you do that? How did you guys launch that site? And how did you get so much usage off of it? Tell me what you did tactically. And, I think they're expecting, well, we threw a bunch of people at it. And I think they're expecting that, well, we just knew what we needed to solve for. But no, it was, no, look at, we had to make sure that we were looking at analytics properly, actually talking to users, finding out what they needed, kind of diving deeper into just surface level thoughts or comments that they leave. And then we also had to change the way we approached design, the way we approached doing development and releases, the way we approached, like I said, doing a beta release to really see, did we hit the mark? And we didn't, by the way. That beta release, there was definitely some changes we had to make before we could do a full market release. But God, if we had done the full market release without those changes, it probably would have caused quite a bit of a stir with the end users and the researcher community. But we were able to fix them pretty fast. And so all of this then becomes a story, right? That my VP is able to bring up to his VP all the way up to the CEO. And then all of a sudden there's this, between my team and again, some of those other teams, pockets elsewhere in the company, now there's this energy, this drive of, hey, I want all the teams to do what they did there. And so how do we make that happen? And that's when in year 2, Agile transformation did start to happen. They actually put some money and people behind it. We brought in coaches. We actually brought in Scrum Master roles, and we rethought how teams were, what the makeup of the teams were. We built up the UX team as well, including having user research team. So that led to kind of a year 2 project. So now think this year 2, beginning of year 2, the Agile transformation is starting. By end of year 2, it's completed for the most part. I mean, it's never complete, but a lot of the training, the processes, the ceremonies, increment planning, all that stuff is in place and required. So it's actually reached pretty quickly a maturity level. But the new goal I had was, all right, continue maintaining and improving that other thing. But now I want you to go out and build our first ever mobile app for one of our primary products that we have. And we tried doing this before, but we could never get it started. So do what you did on the last project and make it happen here. Okay, I'm a glutton for punishment. I like taking those challenges. So I was like, let's do this. So luckily we did have a little bit more analytics to look at here from the flagship product itself, which was only desktop enabled in a browser. It's now responsive as of this year, but it was not prior. There was, like I said, there was some work started in the previous year. So a prototype was actually created by, I believe, a product manager who was actually pretty good at prototyping, I will say. And he actually did some user interviews based off that last year, but it was a small set of people. They're all probably in one location, and we're a global company, global products. So, but I did use it. It was important to have that research, but I expanded upon it, get other users and build off the prototype, maybe scale back the prototype. I had to build the squad again. So I was able to borrow some people from the previous product squad. But there was a major difference with this. We're not talking about a website, we're talking about a mobile app. I've never done a mobile app before. I've been on a couple projects, like tertiary business analyst type thing on a couple mobile apps, but never worked on a team who's dedicated to this. And so now I'm looking around, what was the office at that point, pre-pandemic, I'm looking around and saying, raise your hand if you've ever done mobile development. And luckily there's one guy who had done just a little bit. And I couldn't even tell you what technology he used for it because it was probably a couple of years prior to that. But the main thing is he had seen, and this is important, he had seen what the team had done the prior year with the Master Journalist product. And he said, I want to work with Wes and the team on this new product, and I'll learn mobile to do it. And I'll learn what framework to do it, which we ended up using Flutter. But like, I'll figure it out. He was actually energized. And this is, again, it's important. I think whether you are in an agile transformation or not, it's extremely important that there's this visibility to the benefits of doing things in a certain way that people then start saying, well, I want to try that. I want to be a part of that, right? And so that happened here, lucky to do that. And he did learn it. And he's the architect now for the mobile app. And again, we did this during company-wide agile transformation, which means we're all doing training. We had coaches in, we had several hour per day sessions for many weeks, which was taking away from time of doing development and design. We had to leverage a couple more of those centralized tools. Luckily, they had scaled and grown in the prior year based on some of the other work we did. So that was actually a lot easier and made our jobs a lot easier because we didn't have to build everything in the app or everything behind the app. We had to integrate with several legacy product systems. So similar to the data complexity we had in the last product, but a little bit different here because now we're talking a mobile app, plugging into, really big services in the back end and figuring out how to scale it to mobile. So, we had to figure that out from a design and technology perspective. How to do automated testing on mobile. I mean, so I didn't even think about this going into the product again, because I wasn't used to mobile, but, I need like a phone farm, virtual farm of phones that we can test on. Emulators only go so far. How do you do automated testing against those things? And so there was definitely some purchases that had to happen there as far as like SaaS services or software. And then definitely some ramp up by the QA team, which they did, and they did an awesome job doing it. But we're still learning how to automate mobile effectively and how to automate everything. So we're just not there yet. And then, God, the App Store submission process, so that's not even, it doesn't even feel like a technology thing, but it's, if you haven't done mobile app development, the Android store is pretty simple to get your app in there. the Apple Store, especially with their new privacy policy, is quite the review process. You will get rejected almost every release, just because you forgot something or they changed something in their policy and you got to adapt to it. But luckily, we're able to adapt to it because we are in a fully Scrum team at this point. And so we're able to, have that flexibility, that agility to get that quick hot fix out there, get it resubmitted, and get it to market. And then we had to figure out how to market it. So there was no go-to-market, process that spoke to mobile. It's a little bit different. It's not a lot different, but it's a little bit different. So we had to figure out the nuances of that, especially when we're really pushing to an existing audience plus people who were not using the flagship product. But we overcame, and again, I want that to be a message here. Like these are real things, they're everyday things, and we overcame them because we try to be more flexible, more agile about it, right? And so outcomes are we launched the alpha and beta again in just a couple months. We did a full release a couple months after that, this past January. We're at over 21,000 installs between Android and Apple stores, including getting into China this past week. And then again, so much about our end users through this process, because we're able to do the prototyping, the user testing, the interviews, and get feedback real time in the app through some plugins and such on a regular basis, not a, every time we're thinking of doing a new initiative, now go ask people. No, we're getting feedback on a regular basis that's constantly influencing our backlog and our roadmap and even our strategy. And that's a good thing. Might be scary to some to think about roadmaps and strategy changing all the time, but no, this is a good thing because it's going to change the outcome that you have across all your products. So year 3. So what the customer wanted was that Barbie house on the left. Now you're probably going, what the hell? We just went from enterprise software to a dollhouse. How did this happen? All right. So let's step back. I'm pretty much assuming most of you have heard the term MVP, minimum viable product. I actually prefer minimal lovable product, which I believe came from Melissa Perry, who's a product management guru in the market. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people have seen the image on the left, which is how to build a minimum viable product. And I bring this up because that's very much what we had to do on those other 2 products. Like there's so many asks from end users, internal stakeholders, management, partners, clients. Yeah, I want the mobile app to have this. Oh, I wish it could do that. I wish it could plug into that, like that enterprise application as well, that product, not just one product or like a couple products, make it all one, right? Make it this universal app. And honestly, a lot of the ideas are actually great. They're fantastic. I want them. People keep sending them in. And it's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. That'd be so cool. But you got to be able to put things out that actually blend, like you see on the right, on that bottom right pyramid that you see there, that blends those kind of desirables that are going to give you a little bit of a wow factor, some customer satisfaction. It's got to be usable enough, and it's got to have enough function that it can drive 20,000 installs in a couple months, but then make sure people come back, and then make sure you can scale across it. Because if you start with just functional but it's not usable, it doesn't have any of the desirable or fun things in it, then no one's going to come back to it, except for like maybe some diehard users. If you make everything desirable, then it's probably not even solving their problems. It just looks cool, and it's it's a skin of an app. It's not really doing what you need to do. So I brought this up because it was a timely thing. It was this past week, my daughter all of a sudden got in her head that she didn't want me to build her a dollhouse. She wanted me to, she didn't want me to buy her a dollhouse. She wanted me to build her a dollhouse. I am not a carpenter. I'm a product manager. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a carpenter. My ability to do any type of carpentry or construction is quite limited. But the customer asked for something like the left, which is your typical, I think it's called the Barbie dream house. And And she even asked for an elevator like you see on the left side of it. And she asked for a pool, which you see a slide into a pool on like an upper deck on that dollhouse. And so Sunday at 4 o'clock, after soccer games for the other daughter and things like that, we were finally home, and the younger daughter staring at me the entire time, smiling with a hammer in hand, and says, "Let's do this." And how am I supposed to say no to that? So it's a process of going to the garage and saying, "What do you want? What do you really need?" And it was, I want 3 floors. Okay. I want 2 floors in the upstairs. Okay. The bottom doesn't need to have 2 rooms. Okay. I was like, do we need to have doors and windows? No, no, no. Which, by the way, we figure out when you don't have the doors and windows on one side of the dollhouse, that means that 2 kids can play at the same time, sitting on either side of the house. So, interesting finding. Do I need a physical door between the 2 rooms? No, just leave a space. Oh, like a hallway. Okay, yeah, we can leave a hole right there, which I think you can see in the center of the second floor. I was like, this pool thing, like how are we gonna do this? Well, in the garage, we had a drawer, a wooden drawer, fully intact, that was from an old cabinet, because garages collect things that I cannot even remember. And so I said, great, it'll be a pool / rooftop patio. We'll just slap that thing on top of it, which they were excited about. And then the elevator, I said, so what are we talking? Like, just carve out a square in the back right there, and then you're gonna make something out of cardboard on a piece of string that's gonna lift people up. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. So after 2 hours, it was built. It looks like the picture on the right. As you can see, it already has all the furniture moved in. We had a satisfied, smiling child. In fact, 2 smiling children. There was no out-of-pocket expense because we leveraged all the tools that I had on hand, which was scrap pieces of wood, a drawer, and some screws that I had. And it was completed again within 2 hours. And so that is a micro example of what I try to do when I'm building new products, is what is feasible with what we have. How can I temper down what people are asking for and really give them at first what they only need, with a little bit of customer delight, which I think the pool and the elevator accomplished that. And then if they want to build onto it later, fine. It's actually easier to do that. That's the way to deliver these things. So that's why the dollhouse came into this. And again, it was a timely thing, happened just this past Sunday. So real quick, where are we at, with my current teams, current company? I think we're pretty good on Scrum, and pretty much you'll see the checks. I got a lot of checks on here. There's still always improvements to be made. We're just in process for CI/CD, entertaining the idea of looping in marketing to doing Agile, and we're a completely remote, global, many country. So everyone's working from home now, with a couple like offices to do meetings at. So I've crossed out, I don't care about co-located. We're actually quite successful being remote in all different places. And that's our new post-pandemic normal. So that's where we are. And what I want to leave you with is this, and I mentioned it earlier. The big circle mindset, it's the hardest thing to show people. Like, it's the hardest thing to talk about or like convince someone of, but it's the most impactful. Whereas the small circle, tools and processes, is often the easiest thing to talk to people about. Hey, can we just buy that tool? Can we get Mural? Can we get Envision? Can we get Jira? Can we change the process so we have like Scrum ceremony and stuff like that? It's probably the easiest thing to discuss and convince people of, but it might not bring the full bang of buck that you're looking for across the company. And that's where going into practices and principles and the values of it, which our company does have some great published values for the whole company, but then that mindset, again, people saw what a couple of our, small pockets of teams were doing, and all the way to the C-suite level, that group of people said, we need to look at what they're doing, and we need to transform the entire company to do things like that. And that's how you seed these things, is no matter what situation you're currently in, whether you're in closer to that dream state or you're all the way at that beginning with the, you know, Picard facepalm, you have to be one of the people to go in there and just start seeding pieces of it that need to happen, whether it's Agile, Scrum, whether it's design thinking, it's UX done properly, user research, analytics, all of those things. Start seeding them now, and then make sure that the benefits of it are communicated up to your senior managers, and they'll then create a windfall where the company starts changing. And that is what I'm going to leave you with.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Wes. I know we only have a couple of minutes left for Q&A, but we see we can stretch it out a minute. Do anybody have any questions? It's a great presentation.
So I'll look through some of the comments.
Well, Adam, I think Adam has a question.
Hey, Wes.
Hey.
First, really enjoyed the talk. I guess the question I have is, so you kind of had your own little band, got together, right? Almost like anyway, I'm thinking about some of the books out there, but then you got this demand, people coming to you saying, hey, I want to work with you. And I imagine that you had or are having more people show up at your door than you have people to do things with, and they want to go do these things like you, but don't know how to do those. How are you managing that pull that you wanted now that it's here?
One of the most important things there is you kind of have to do a grassroots type scenario. And I know it sounds like that's going to take a lot of time, but it doesn't have to. So yes, there have definitely been product managers, even some BAs who have come to me and said, not that they, hey, I want to join your team. I'm not going to sell myself that way, but like come and say, God, I really wish our team could work like you guys had done here in the way that people have talked about. And what I can then do is say, all right, well, where are you having struggle with? So sometimes maybe they're struggling with their UX person who doesn't want to collaborate with the product manager and the dev team, but they want to just like kind of dictate that this is the way things are going to look in the app. Very specific example, but that's where I could say, well, why don't I have my UX person reach out to your UX person and you, right? And talk about how we work together. And if that doesn't work, then there can be a higher level up conversation, which I know maybe sounds a little threatening, but like those are the types of things that have to happen, right? You have to get people used to people noticing that this team's operating like this, and we'd really like this other team to operate this way. Can we at least talk to someone, let them share their experiences, just like I did, to say, oh, so that's how you're doing it. Yeah, that I could probably do that. And you can do that in different ways. I mean, different functions as well. Like developers, you could definitely do that. Let's say you have an architect who is very set on kind of that waterfall, heavy document, heavy requirement way of doing things. Bring in one of the other architects who's gotten used to a more agile way of doing things, who's actually been involved in some of the discovery, because that's huge, and have them talk to it and say, yeah, it's really not that bad, dude. We can figure it out. Like, this is what I did. This is what I had to get used to. This is what I hated at first. Let them have that, conversation, but then eventually they'll start influencing the other person as well to say, we got over it by doing this. We compromised. Like maybe we compromised with the product manager. I certainly did a lot of that. Hey, Wes, we can't just do that, or we can't do it that fast, or there's got to be this check and balance. Okay, let's do that. Let's do it as minimally as possible, but let's do it.
Wes, so I think I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to be conscious of time. There was one other point, and that is, I noticed you called out UX kind of early in your slides. It has been my experience. I'm curious if it was your experience. Like UX is undervalued, particularly early on, and we often don't have enough of them.
Yeah. So product managers probably do most of the screaming up that we need more UX staff, we need talented UX staff, that we want to interview candidates for that staff. Get your developers to do it too. Because man, when a developer is handed a beautiful design that is like, you don't even need a requirements document. They just look at it and they're like, ah, yeah, I know what you need to do, and has some interaction to it and envision or whatever. Get them to sell up as well. You know, again, it's the grassroots thing. It's an influencer thing. Get them to push up that, hey, if we had that UX person, I would spend 50%, 30% of the time I'm spending now developing the app, because I wouldn't have as many questions and it would just get done. You know, you've got to like bring in those micro benefits that happen, because they do add up, and it creates that story up to senior management.
I think we're going to have to end it right there. We want to thank you again, Wes, and for Adam, people asking questions. We just want to give time for people to join the next session. And I know in a minute, people are going to be joining this session, this channel for the next session. So we want to get ready all for that. But again, thank you very much for joining this session. Thank you, Wes, for presenting. And if you want to stay on for the next talk, we have on this channel, we have Cameron Hall, how we launched an app in the middle of COVID. So, thanks, everyone.